Howdy everyone. So I've been chipping away a little bit at this cowling work, and you'll notice a couple of things. One, I now have my funnel for the dust collector on the floor, and you'll notice that the sheet that I had on the floor is now gone. The sheet was basically on the floor to keep the fiberglass cowling from scratching the crap out of the floor, but it was a bigger pain to have it in place than having the floor slightly scratched, so I decided to get rid of the sheet. The fiberglass is not doing hardly any damage at all to my floor, and it's not the end of the world. I plan on having the floor re-waxed when the plane is out of here anyway. So the sheet is gone. The dust collector funnel is now on the ground. I find it a lot more easier, and actually I believe it's a little bit nicer on my back to have it down on the floor and just keep the cowling on the floor and work it that way than try to stand up above it, leaning around and things like that. So for me personally, I like it better on the floor. The cowling, when I work on it, I literally just lay it down. I'll take the half, set it aside, take the half that I need to work on, and lay it down on the floor and have the dust collector going. And that works quite well. So here is what I have so far. And I'm going to say right out of the gate, I am not impressed at all with the fit of these cowlings. The front half, everything that you see here, these three openings, in my opinion, initially were pretty lousy. It almost seems to me like this is the bottom. This is the bottom cowl here. This is the top. It almost seems to me like this area here, of the bottom cowl was misshaped. And the reason I say that is, and I don't know if this is going to show up on camera, this line right here, this seam between these two pieces is nice and straight. It seems to line up nice with this seam and this seam here. This one seems to run uphill from like this corner over to this corner. That seam seems to be jacked up this way a lot. When I initially started working on getting these two halves together, they were a mess. I couldn't get any of these four seams to look decent. These two were the closest. These two were really bad. With this seam here closed, I had a gap here of about, I'm going to say about 3/16 of an inch. And it was nice and straight. This side, with this seam here closed all the way, I had a gap here of about, I'm going to say again, probably about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch, but the gap on this side was at least a half. It was really bad. But this seam was already closed. So in order to close this gap, I had to take a lot of material off of this seam here to bring this together to close this gap. And I'll show you now with this seam closed. Of course, this is not finished. I still have a lot of work to do, but with this seam closed, you can see now what this looks like. And it is so much better because this gap was really huge. But you can see, especially right here in this corner, there's still like 1/8 of an inch through here. You can see here, this bottom cowl, you can see how this runs kind of in this direction instead of straight across. It's kind of like this. And then you can see on this side, there's basically no gap. Here is the other side, and it is closing up quite nicely all the way around, even down through here. And this side, of course, is just about closed up. So it looks to me like this area of this bottom cowl was misshaped. And you can see when you stand and look down, you can see the line that comes across here and right here. This seems to just get kicked uphill. But I'm working it. It will be fine. The one thing that I was concerned about was if I take a lot of material off here and start closing this down, this intake opening is going to be smaller than this intake opening here. So I've been measuring these to make sure that this opening out here in the corner and this opening out here in the corner were roughly the same, even though I was taking material off of here. I have been taking material off of this one as well to keep this gap nice and closed, but not as much as I've been taking off of here. The good news is this one seemed to be a little bit bigger anyway. So taking material off here has not been all that big of a deal. The other good news is it doesn't take a lot of material to, I don't have to remove a lot here to make a big difference on this end. So that's kind of nice. I can take a little bit off and it makes a pretty decent amount of change here. The other thing that you'll notice is this step here. You can see that this flange here is physically longer than this flange here, and that's consistent on both sides. You can see the step here. So I will probably trim this off all the way around to match this one. And you can see here, this in here, between the two halves seems to line up nicely and look nice. However, on this side, not so much. I've got a little bit of a step here. And you can see it almost looks like this bottom cowling needs to shift this way, or the top cowling needs to shift this way because there's a ridge here. And that is almost impossible to do because these lock into place with each other. There's a flange under here. This piece, this front cowling, slips over top of the flange of the bottom piece, here and here. So you can't just take the bottom and top pieces and shift them back and forth. So I don't know what I'm going to do about this step. But I'm not there yet. I'm still trying to get these gaps closed. The other thing is that the manual tells you that you want to try to keep this circle a circle. You basically want the width to be the same measurement as the height. But again, I find that very difficult to do because when you're dealing with this seam and you're taking material off, you're in effect closing up this circle. But you don't have any way of closing up the circle left to right because it's a big molded piece. So as you're taking material off to fix these gaps, you're bringing this closer together, but there's no way to adjust the measurement this way. So you do what you can with what you have. If I didn't have this mess up here, I would already be done with this. It would have been really quick because this side was pretty close and it doesn't take a lot of material here, removal here, to bring this together. This area in here was so jacked, I really had to work with it a lot to get it the way that you see it now. So, like I said, as of right now, not impressed with the fit. I did a lot of work on it yesterday. I'm going to finish it up now. Like I said, I'm getting close. You know, this is decent. This is a little bit better. This is decent. This is decent. I'm going to continue to work it. I probably got another couple of hours of work anyway, just to get this looking decent. And then I'll go on from there. The other thing is that I try to keep the corners together. When I was fitting this top area, I noticed that down here, one cowling wanted to overlap the other. So to keep them somewhat lined up, I decided to go with these big paper clips. This is probably about a 2-inch wide. paper clip. There's more surface area here with the clip itself being nice and large. I know that people have used the clamps, the Cleco clamps, but those are really small and they're cumbersome. This is a little bit easier, not a lot, but I find these clamps to be easier, slightly easier to work with than the Cleco clamps. So I put one of those on each corner. There's the other one down there. I've got the cowling flat on the floor, and then it's just a lot of repetitive work. You fit it together, you see what you need to do, you may mark some areas, and then I take the clamps off, separate the halves, lay it down, work it, clean it, stand it back up, put the halves together, reclamp it, check my work, make more mental notes, what needs to happen, remark it, repeat, repeat, repeat. Very tedious, but it needs to be done. So some of the tools, just some simple files, some flat files, some half round files, rat tail files, my Dremel to do the initial cutting. And that reminds me, there were none and there are no scribe lines on either one of these cows. There are no reference lines, there's no scribe lines, there isn't anything. Even on the door here for the oil door, the dipstick door that you have to cut out. No scribe lines, no marks, no anything. So I haven't trimmed or cut anything. I've only been working on trying to get this front end to look right. Now I have been taking some material off of this side here because like I said, this whole thing had to come together to close up this mess here. So I've been taking some material off of here, but hardly any. So when I fit this onto the plane itself, I should have a lot of excess material that I'll be able to work with to get it to look nice and to close up nicely. But neither one of these cows has any scribe lines at all. And I've looked on the inside, the outside. I've had different kind of lighting on it. No scribe lines. So some of my initial bigger cuts I used a Dremel, but hardly. There weren't really that many to make since I don't have scribe lines. So a small cutoff wheel on the Dremel was used just briefly. I've got a sanding drum here for the Dremel. I use this quite a bit. And I'll show you that later. But the thing that I use most is a simple wood block with some 60 grit sandpaper. I use this on pretty much all of it. This gets used a ton. So there you have it. My initial experience with getting this cowling fitted. So like I said, I've got a couple more hours of work to do just on the front stuff. Once I get that to my liking, then I'll start fitting the top cowl to the plane itself. All right, moving on. I'll talk to you guys later.